Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me to discuss how companies can rebuild their workforce with gig or contingent workers is Jens Audenaert. He's the General Manager of WorkMarket with ADP. Jens, welcome to Trade Talks. It's great to have you with us.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Jill.
All right, Jens, tell us about WorkMarket.
So WorkMarket is a technology platform that allows companies to really manage the entire life cycle of engaging with an extended workforce, so contractors and freelancers. So if you think of ADP as the leading provider of human capital management technology and services for companies to manage their traditional W-2 employees, that's what WorkMarket is looking to do, but for the extended workforce. And it was an acquisition by ADP a couple of years ago. And we really made that acquisition in the belief that the future of work is much more around total talent management, and companies will embrace all different kinds of labor and kind of think of that holistically as part of their human capital strategy.
Well, as companies return to the work and begin to rebuild their workforce, why do you believe gig work is going to become more prevalent?
It's a great question. I really do believe that companies will be more thoughtful around embracing that extended workforce. And that belief really stems from some of the observations that we see in the world of work just these last few months. There's certain trends that really align well with what traditionally have been reasons for companies to really leverage the extended workforce, so freelancers and contractors. So things like shifting to a remote model, right? A lot of companies had to almost overnight shift from workers in the office to workers working from home. Us at ADP almost overnight had more than 95% of our global associates working from home, and a lot of other organizations have very successfully done that as well. So I think that's one trend that we see. But there's also this realization that we're in this for a prolonged period of economic uncertainty. And so, we might see parts of the country reopen and then close back again. And so companies really have to think very carefully around how they're going to flex really as demand spikes, but can also go back again. And then lastly, I would say very kind of tied to the COVID pandemic is travel restrictions. If you do business internationally or across state lines, but you don't have employees in those areas because of travel restrictions and mandatory quarantine, you may not be able to serve that demand with your own employee bases. And so those are really reasons why companies, even in the past, have embraced the extended workforce and have embraced using freelancers. It's that comfort level with working remotely and independently. It's the ability to scale flexibly, and it's the ability to service demand where you don't have employees. And so we at WorkMarket, we're here to help companies make that shift. And just like the rest of ADP, we're really here to help companies return to work faster.
Right, of course. And the obvious question is there's got to be value in there for the companies to use gig workers.
Absolutely. So we've talked a lot about flexibility, and that's really the main reason why traditionally companies leverage an extended workforce. But it is also about cost, right? And I think companies that do this well are very thoughtful around thinking not just about kind of headcount and jobs, but really around tasks that need to be done and using the right set of label for the right task at the right time. If you ask employees if they use their skills at work, sadly enough, less than 40% would say that they do. So by really being thoughtful around who does what job when, you can not only reduce cost and be more flexible, but you can also improve SLAs. And in the end, you can actually also improve your employee engagement.
So Jens, when I hear about a gig worker, my first thought is to go to rideshare. That seems to be synonymous with it. What other types of companies are using contingent workers?
So oftentimes, indeed, when I talk about WorkMarket, people ask me about the Ubers and the Lyfts. But the reality is that across industries, across companies, across use cases, companies really are using freelancers already. And we see that in our client base. But the ADP Research Institute also published a study earlier this year where we looked at 10 years of data. And what we found was that across enterprises, about 1 in 6 workers is actually a gig worker. And we also found that that's true across geographies, across industries. So that's definitely true for the WorkMarket client base as well. Maybe one example of a client, if you will, to point out is Volunteer Surge, which is a nonprofit consortium that WorkMarket is a part of that was established in the wake of the COVID pandemic, where we are working with couple of other organizations like Salesforce, Amazon Web Services, Absorb LMS, to pretty much manage on the WorkMarket platform volunteers that help fight the COVID pandemic by doing things like contact tracing or mobile grief support. And so again, it's really helping us get through this pandemic and hopefully helping companies return to work quicker.
Now, how should companies go about actually finding the gig workers and onboarding them?
Good question. Kind of a chicken and an egg thing. You want to engage an extended workforce, but where are they really? I think it's very important for companies to embrace, as I said before, this notion of total talent management. And as part of that, there's also total talent acquisition and total talent brand. So a lot of companies think about things like employer branding. How are you going to be an employer of choice? But it's very important for your contractors and freelancers that you are a client of choice, if you will. And so you really want to make sure that you are the kind of company that contractors want to work for. You know, oftentimes that could be things like, what are your payment terms? Do you pay on time? How long does it take you to approve a job? So I think companies need to think about that. And then if they're really going to use an extended workforce at scale for a specific use case, I think it's important for them to also just build a bench of contractors that they can tap into. But it is something that requires effort. And again, we at WorkMarket are here to help companies with that.
And Jens, finally, how does the company navigate the complex compliance issues involved in all the areas that you mentioned?
Yeah, compliance, obviously, especially when it comes to engaging with independent contractors and freelancers, is top of mind for a lot of our clients. And again, our platform can help with that. I think where it really starts for companies is establishing and defining the right processes and policies and guardrails that guide how the organization can engage with independent contractors. But beyond that, you know, once you have those policies and guardrails, it's about having the right technology to enforce that. Something that we talk a lot about in our space is what we call rogue spend. It's really the employees of an organization finding freelancers on online platforms and swiping a corporate T&E card to pay for those. And so you don't really, even if you have the right policies in place, you don't really know as an organization that they're being adhered to. So our platform really is here to help companies codify those policies and make sure that they are adhered to. We create the visibility, we create the audit trails, and then that ultimately leads to taking out the risk and ultimately taking out the costs and reduce the cost for the organization.
All right, Jens, appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks.
Absolutely, it was great to be here, Jill. Thanks.
And thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.